Hi, hello, welcome in, get cozy, get yourself a drink. I would usually say a hot drink, but it is a heat wave right now. Me, myself, I am still drinking a piping hot lemsip because I feel myself getting sick again, even though I was just sick last month. My immune system works well. Today I have a stack of books. These are the 7 books that I read in my first year of uni. My first semester was poetry, and I don't feel like trying to dive through the probably dozens and dozens of poems I read there and trying to rank them. I thought that ranking would be just like a fun way to discuss these books, to line them up in the order that isn't just the order that I read them, and to engage with them a little bit more critically and think about what I liked about each of them and why I liked some of them more. But to be honest, I was extremely lucky. Like, I heard horror stories of people going to uni for English literature and getting like books they hated, books they were just trudging through, like really over intellectual stuff in the first year, and I lucked out. I loved pretty much every single one of these books, and I really enjoyed all of them. Because this semester was just meant to be kind of like an introduction to the novel and studying narrative, we did novels chronologically spanning from 1818 through to, I think, 2022 was the last one was published. So yes, without further ado, let us rank the first 7 books of my English literature career. The 7th is kind of just an honorary shout out because I didn't actually finish this book. This was the last book of the semester. Exams had already started and it wasn't necessary to read it anymore, and to be honest, I would have done it dirty. So technically it's the last on the list, but I can't actually say it's the last because I didn't read it. That doesn't seem fair. After Sappho by Selby Lynn Schwartz. I'm still getting used to this. It's the first time I've ever filmed with this camera, so I don't really know how the focus is gonna work. Is that in focus? Not even a little bit. I did not finish this one, and what I did read, I read it completely wrong. I decided to try and read through audiobook for this one because, again, it was the end of the semester. I was really busy, but I still wanted to be able to engage at my seminar for this book. I didn't even realise that it was written in fragments. I feel like its structure is really integral to the story it's trying to tell and the thing it's trying to explore thematically, so I would not recommend doing this on audiobook. From what I gathered, this is like a historical account of people who were impacted by Sappho, specifically women who were impacted by Sappho and the legacy of Sappho on women's struggle, but also women's liberation, women's love. I definitely want to actually go back and read this book properly at some point. I just haven't really wanted to at this period of time, but I definitely will at some point because, again, in my seminar we really started to have good discussions, but nobody had read the book. Nobody had read the book. So it was kind of just me and my teacher bouncing off each other about the very little that I had gathered about this book. But yeah, I wanted to mention it. I did read it and I thought that it had the seeds of something really good, but I picked the wrong format to read it and I certainly didn't get very far. So this does not count. Does anyone else feel like tea and tea adjacent drinks make their throat and mouth really dry? Is there a science behind that? Because I would like to not feel that way. Okay, sorry if you've moved a little bit. I'm trying to like figure out the focus on here because my books are out of focus and that's really annoying. Bear with me as I figure out my camera, but my, I guess, officially least favorite book that I read, but this breaks my heart because this was such a good book, was The Fat Lady Sings by Jacqueline Roy. Is that focusing? I can't see. This was the second most contemporary book that we read. I didn't know I was going to be such a contemporary hater, but here we are. This was published in 2000. This is a contemporary literary fiction following 2 Black women and their time in the psychiatric facility. This book definitely questions the use of specifically medication and like sedentary medication in psychiatric facilities. Gloria, my absolute favorite, she ends up getting detained by the police after suffering the loss of her wife, and kind of how her behaviours are seen as not acceptable by people in the community, not normal. That was probably the thing that I loved about this book the most. I read it over the course of a day on a train. Definitely the most easy to read book on the list. Not subject matter wise, that was definitely not very easy to read at times. There was depictions of mental health in this that I found maybe to be actually a little overwrought, a little bit theatrical. I know that they do exist. Like, it's not like these were entirely caricatures of mental illness. And I think that discussion of what constitutes as normal and this habit we have of policing the unnormal. Why is it that just because something is not normal and a behaviour makes you uncomfortable through that not normalness, why does that mean it needs to be suppressed? Why does it mean it needs to be taken out and corrected? I think that it's very nuanced, and I love that the book was willing to take that stance and just like question, like, why is that our natural instinct to someone who's dealing with something in a certain behavioural way? Obviously, if someone is a threat to themselves or others, that is different. And I think that the other character we follow in this book, who remains unnamed for a large portion of it, she definitely falls more into that, I would say. But it's not always the case. We do societally just have a tendency to want to correct behaviour that doesn't fit into our idea of normal or how you should act in society. Our other character has this kind of split narrative between what she is saying and the voice that's in her head. I think there was something really interesting in that. I think for me, again, it almost felt like it was like very obvious to me that this was a book. I was reading a book that this was happening in. I don't know if that makes sense. I think that though that is kind of the only reason why this is the last one. Is paired up against like some real masterpieces, and as much as it was a really enjoyable, and it did stick with me, like I do think about this, and that idea of normalness really stuck out to me. And also the ending to the book made me teary, made me cry. I thought it was a really beautiful ending, but overall it didn't have the impact on me that some of these other books did. From here on out, the top 5, which is funny because there's only 7, are books that genuinely are like masterpieces of our time and of times that have gone and passed. This was extremely hard to order these, and I would definitely be open to rearranging them a number of which ways. I would say my number 1 is Locked In for Life, but you could swivel these around in some sort of way. But next up we have Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. You can see that this went through it in my time of taking it to uni and back. It feels crazy having this at number 5 on any list because James Baldwin is one of the best writers that I have ever encountered. I read The Fire Next Time by him, which is more of a non-fiction, like, I wouldn't even say essay collection, but letter collection. I was very intrigued to read this. I also had multiple people in my classes who said this was their favourite book of all time. One of my lecturers who was speaking about the book was like, this is the best piece of fiction you'll ever read. So the bar was very, very high. We followed David, who is American, who lives in Paris. He's gay. And this is the 1950s. So he does not want to acknowledge that. He is not happy about this fact. He tries to repress it very much. This room, Giovanni's room, is kind of a culmination of this secret and how it has to live and how it festers and rots. The shame in this book manifests in so many different violent ways. This isn't an extremely graphic or violent book. Obviously, it's not like Queer Joy, but it's the interpersonal violence that is so striking in this book. The prose is obviously wonderful. It's just like such incredible character work. I completely forgot to talk about probably my favourite part of this book to read, to study, to contemplate, which was its relationship with privilege, and specifically whiteness and queerness and that intersection. And I feel James Baldwin hit the nail on the fucking head in a way that is still so relevant. The attitude of a lot of people in the 1900s, and honestly to this day, whether subconsciously or not, is that whiteness is the shield of protection. Your whiteness has owed you ability to move through the world more easily and almost to be above someone else and not have to worry about being below. And queerness is seen as the leveler by David and by others. David has this vitriol, this real violent anger towards feminine gay men. Femininity is seen as kind of the physical representation of the queerness, and David hates that there are people who embrace this thing that he sees as the thing that has taken away the privilege that he was granted and owed through his whiteness. And I feel
this is a kind of sociological explanation for so many things that we still see to this day in the conversation around whiteness and queerness. I think very, very real and very, very astute.
I always say I want to make these videos like really cozy and like quiet, and then when I start talking about a book, my excitement kind of ruins that vibe. I think part of the reason why this is not further up my list, despite all of the praises that I've just spat about James Baldwin, one, I read it split up. I read half of it during the semester and then the other half after the semester was finished, and I just wanted to go back and finish it. So having like a split up experience with the book is never the most rewarding, and I definitely hate when I do that to myself. It's a story about just people living their lives with all of these undercurrents of emotions and societal contexts, but I think maybe that made it kind of blend in with the other things I was reading at the time. I'd say it's probably the most concise exploration of these themes that I've ever read. It would probably be like if someone was like, I want to read my first book about queer shame and what it was like to be queer in the 1900s, and I would say Giovanni's Room. I suppose this is certainly a topic that nowadays is discussed a lot more thoroughly than it was in the 1950s. So I feel very grateful to have that and to have read one of the, as people say, one of the ancient texts, one of the groundwork texts for what we now know as kind of queer literary fiction. Purely intellectually, I could definitely see people arguing that this was like one of the great books of all time. But I'd say my actual reading experience, it was number 5 of the lot. Currently, that might change. This camera definitely washes me out. I feel like I look like Edward Cullen. Next up, number 4 on the list, we have The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is not the first time that I read The Picture of Dorian Gray. I read it, I want to say 2 years ago now. We have Dorian Gray. He is a youthful, rich, funny little boy that everyone loves to make like dance monkey, and enjoys his naivete and his beauty, and he's this object of affection and kind of like patronizing attention. And he's friends with Basil Hallward, who is a painter who is obsessed with painting Dorian because he's just the most beautiful man he's ever seen. So Basil paints his magnum opus portrait of Dorian and says, you need to shove it away. Nobody can see this because it has too much of myself in it. This book is also kind of gay. So Dorian keeps it hidden up in a cupboard. And as he does so, he becomes closer friends with Basil's other friend, Lord Henry. Now, Lord Henry, the most despicable man you've ever seen. This is a story based in aestheticism, which was this 19th century philosophical idea about aesthetics, about how art should have no moral standing and everything should be beautiful and outrageous. It was just this kind of middle upper class idea about morals and about art. So this book is very, very rooted in that. Oscar Wilde himself was a lover of the aesthetics. So Lord Henry is a strong aestheticist. He's like, Dorian, nothing matters. You don't need to be good. All you need to be is beautiful and young forever. That's the only thing that matters. And he's horrid about poor people. He's horrid about pretty much everyone. They just talk shit. Everyone gossips. And slowly, as Lord Henry corrupts Dorian Gray, the portrait hidden in his basement or cupboard or wherever it is starts to rot and age. So the portrait becomes a physical representation of Dorian's moral decay. Dorian himself does not age. So years and years and years pass, he starts doing more and more despicable. The moral conflict happening is that Oscar Wilde believed that art shouldn't be moralistic in some sense, but this book is kind of a moral message. I definitely took it that way the first time I read it. I had no idea about this aestheticism or anything like that, so I took it as like the message here is if you do moral wrong, you are bad and you're rotting inside. And then finding out all of this context, it made me really engage with the book differently, and we had a lot of really fun discussions about whether we think this book is a moral tale or if it's simply poking fun at moral tales or being like a satire, gothic satire of moral tales. I still don't know. What I do love so much is this decay in it. It really is like the most grotty soap opera. Like, everyone is terrible and always, as I said, like gossiping. Also does have these lush aesthetic sensory descriptions, because the sensory aspect was also a big part of aestheticism as well. So you can really feel things in this, but you can smell them, you can taste them. The characters are really, really indulgent in that way. Oscar Wilde is just like so astute. Like, he just understands his society and the people that he's around really, really well. This is also just such a fun book to study because you can look at it from so many different lenses. I did end up writing an essay specifically about like the aestheticism in the book, but there's so many different lenses you could read this through and so many different things you can pick up in it. I love it. I'm sure I will keep coming back to it over and over again. I spun these next two books around so many times. I was not expecting to end up with the second place that I ended up with, let me tell you. I thought that this next book was going to be my second place, but alas, there was a shock entry. But in third place is the absolutely breathtaking Orlando by Virginia Woolf. Beautiful. This is a really hard book to describe, so you're going to have to give me some leeway here as I remember the multifacets of this book. Orlando is... Oh boy. We start out with Orlando as a young boy. He lives in a huge house where he is extremely solitary and he loves it. He loves to be by himself. He loves his lonesome. He does not understand love and friendship. He takes on one lover and then he ends up in a week-long slumber of which he wakes up a woman. This change happens with no seeming catalyst. There doesn't seem to be any significant event of the change. She wakes up and she's a woman, and that is as it is accepted by everyone else. No one bats an eyelid about this, no one questions it. She doesn't question it, she just says, oh, I'm a woman. And then we continue on to follow her life, different lovers, her experience being a writer, she longs to be a poet, her relationship with nature. This book really is, it's not so much a plot book. I definitely wouldn't encourage you to go into it if you're not into long meanders. Everything is weird, there's no logic, and the writing flows and flows and flows and flows and flows. That is personally what I loved about it and why it is my number 3 and was almost my number 2. This is one of the most like enchanting prose I've ever read. Like, it literally like could bring a tear to my eye. I think there's also something about that flow in the prose. Like, not only do we span this huge period of time, which it takes place over the course of like 140 years, and Orlando by the end of it is only 39 years old. It takes its own liberties with time and aging and everything. Like, I love that. I love that it plays with logic so wonderfully. I mean, we already had this kind of miraculous sex change in the book. It's not like a regular transition novel. It doesn't matter. Like, that is the magic of it, that it's asking you to walk with it in its stream that it's leading you down, where it kind of goes from scene to scene, and sometimes you can't really place where you actually are, like on the ground. You don't really know where you are, you don't really know what the scene is. You're just here with Orlando as their thoughts flow, or the narrator's thoughts flow, because this is written as a biography of Orlando. Also, that as like a blending fluid kind of narrative, like, is it this narrator speaking or is it Orlando themselves and their thoughts? This just had so much in it that like really spoke to my interest, not only like thematically, like any kind of writing about nature or, as I say, solitude writing. These 3 themes are just like ones that really, really, really speak to me. And when someone writes it this beautifully, Shocker, this is also another one of the books I decided to write on this year, and I just had so much fun. I wished that I had so much more time to read all of the critical texts, to like dive into so many different perspectives about this book, because there is so much in here. Like, this isn't a book that I would recommend to that many people. I don't know really many people at all that I know that I would recommend this to, because I understand why it frustrated other people. Again, if you need like a plot to follow, this is not going to be the one for you. This itself was written as a love letter from Woolf to Vita Sackville-West, which was her aristocrat lover. So there's also that sense of irony that Orlando comes across, specifically as a young boy, like this representation of this imperial, out of touch, indulgent figure. There definitely is the imperial, colonial, racist language in this book at times, which represents a lot within it, within its vacuum, but also specifically outside the vacuum. We know that Virginia Woolf maybe did not have the best understanding of race. As a piece of work, it really is just a gift that keeps on giving. I cannot wait to read this again one day. I'm leaving it for years and years and years because I want to see how differently it sits with me when it's been years. I definitely don't want to read it again during my time at uni because it is a lot for sure, but I'm so glad I read it. It's such a whirlwind, but such a beautiful, poetic whirlwind. I also have heard that this is the least challenging of Virginia Woolf's works, at least her fiction works, so that both intrigues and scares me. The final two are upon us. This second place, I'm telling you, I was shocked. I have one friend at uni who's a year above me who also studies English literature, and he told me that this was the book that he kind of warned me of this one. He was like, read it early, it's a slog, you're not gonna like it probably. And that is Lot by Shola von Reinhold. This was a 2020 release from a fellow Scottish author. Oh wow, I actually haven't thought about this book since I read it, and like, I'm getting excited. This is one of these weird books that is inspired by modernism. I don't want to try and explain modernism because honestly I don't really understand it myself, but what I've read of modernism is a bit wacky, structure wise and prose wise and everything. It just kind of likes to flip things on its head, and this book, oh wow, this book is like a piece of modernism and also a critique of modernism. We follow Matilda, who has had many different names, many different selves. They are pretty much living rough in, I want to say, London, but that might not be right. And so they apply for this project, like this research project that's in Paris, where you get to go and live there and study, and they give you like a grant to study and use the archives. One thing about Matilda is that they have these, what they call transfictions, just like essentially fixations on these different historical figures. Throughout their lives they fixate on different people, and it's like this event, like they can feel when a transfiction is about to happen with a certain person. So at the start of the book, they've established this transfiction on Hermia Druitt, who is a fictional, in world real, but in our world, fictional black aristocrat. She was in the circles with the Bright Young Things, which is a group that Virginia Woolf is a part of. This is real. There was a group called the Bright Young Things that was these authors and artists, like kind of, again, these aristocrat, like eccentrics. She stuck out because she was this black woman in this world of the white upper class. So Matilda wants to research Hermia in the archive. That is essentially her mission when she's going to Paris. She just wants to get paid to find out as much about Hermia as possible. Like, Hermia is so important to their understanding of themselves, it feels like at this point. It uses the imagery of the lotus flowers, which is from Greek mythology, I'm pretty sure. It's all about this, again, aestheticism. Like, these books all link together so well. Like, they actually really ate with how they picked these out, because they really communicate with each other, which I just like love. Anyway, I'm gonna keep rambling on about like the layers and layers and layers of this book, but essentially it has these themes of the archive, which I found so interesting. Who is left out of the archive? What makes the archive history? Like, is the archive subjective? How it kind of is this thing in the world. Like, it's almost like a physical thing that has power in the world. How so many Black figures are essentially raised either physically or because they're just written as white in the archive. And it speaks about this idea of aesthetic indulgence and who gets to perform aesthetic indulgence and what it means to do that in kind of conversation with being an artist. There was just so much in here. Like, I was blown away, to be honest, by the depths that I found in this book. Again, most people I spoke to did not like this one. Most of them didn't even finish it. They were like, I don't care about this. That seminar class, me and my teacher, we were gabbing. We were going off. I wouldn't recommend it if you don't want something that's going to be a little bit, I guess, confusing. I didn't really find it too confusing, but it doesn't follow a traditional narrative, like linear path, I suppose. But it's so engaging. It's not like Orlando, where you're kind of meandering all over the place and you're not really centered in a room. In this, you definitely are. There is like, you're here, this is what's happening, then it goes into this and this and this. But there's just something about this. Like, I just was so impressed, and I'm so glad that I found like a newer contemporary book that I was so impressed with. And I know that this this author is working on a new book right now, so I will be buying. Anyone who knows me is not going to be shocked by this first place. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This copy has been a companion of mine that I can never be replaced. My Norton Critical edition. This is like how much the book is, and then the rest of it is critical theory about the book and like historical context and stuff. Like, I eat it up. I first read Frankenstein, again, I think 2 years ago now, possibly. If you don't know the original story of Frankenstein, maybe you know of the movies, the adaptations, etc., but you don't know the original. We follow Victor, who has this insatiable need, this compulsion in him to pursue his scientific project of trying to reinstall life in inanimate body parts. And he does it. And he regrets that for the rest of his life. This book has a glorious amount of exposition, okay, as they did in the 19th century. So we do follow a lot of Victor's family life and what leads him up to this kind of compulsive need, what drives him to this, like what his relationship is with science and how he gets there academically. And then, of course, the birth of the creature happens, and we then follow the creature. One of my favourite characters in all of literature. The creature is this compassionate, clever, troubled, cursed being, cursed to a life of solitude, because, of course, as soon as he is born and created, he is detested by his own creator. The worst burden that could happen to anyone. And then he's detested by everyone who ever encounters him because of his huge physical stature. Subsequently, due to his rejection from all of human society, he ends up just seeking out revenge on Victor. And it's like genuinely one of the most sad things I've ever read in my life. This book is so troubling and haunting, but so grand and also so minute and personal and interior. One of my absolute favourite things about this book is its settings. I love this cover specifically because it has a glacier on it, and I had no idea before I started reading it that it had this expansive, like, natural landscape to it. There is a lot of travelling. This book can honestly be called like a travel novel. Some of the best scenes, the climaxes of this book take place amongst the glaciers and like the ice up north, and it's just like so incredible to read, so cinematic and huge. Like, it is just that like 19th century melodrama, but to the extreme. Like, it's not really mellow anymore. This book is tender but harsh but beautiful. Like, the way the creature sees the world just brings a tear to my eye. It's just like So it reunites the wonder that we have about the world around us and animals and nature and language. Like, obviously, I'm such a fucking nerd about language. So having a character who is just enamored by the power of language and getting to learn it for the first time and really talk to people, and how that communication fails him and isn't enough for people to really understand him. There's, of course, like the biblical kind of aspect to this, which is so interesting. Essentially, playing God. Victor is a figure playing God, and that conversation about your creator and damning your creator. This was definitely considered to be a blasphemous novel at the time of it getting released. I'm not gonna ramble too much more because I imagine that this book will come up a billion and one times over any videos that I make in the future, because it just has had such an impact on me and my taste in literature and my relationship with studying it and taking out themes from things and extracting all that you can from a novel. There definitely are slower moments in this book, but I think when you love it, you just don't see the slow moments anymore, and it just all becomes this feast for your brain. I'll always recommend this. Everyone has to read Frankenstein at least once. It is the blueprint. It is the blueprint of... Okay, that's not true. It's not the blueprint of sci-fi or gothic, but it feels like it's the blueprint of melding some of these things together into this wonderful Frankenstein-esque concoction. This is, of course, the book I wanted to write about more than anything else. So I wrote my final essay about Frankenstein and Orlando in conversation about specifically, I would say queer, but specifically trans themes, because you can read this book in a queer lens, you can read this book through a lens of disability, of illness, normativity. There's so many lenses you can read Frankenstein, and I had such a good time writing that essay. I mean, I didn't. I was pulling my hair out, of course, but it was a privilege to get to read those two books in conversation with each other. That is it. That was my first ever English literature novel syllabus. And what a privilege. Like, truly, I just enjoyed all of these books so much, and I'm missing uni so much. Like, I've just gotten past the period where I was like, I'm so sick of uni and I'm so glad it's done. I miss it. Bring it home. I've definitely had a lot of questioning recently about my degree and all that yada yada, as you do if you pursue a arts and humanities subject, I'm sure. But having this time away from it and thinking about what I get to do every day makes me so grateful, and yeah, I miss it, and I'm so glad that this is what I'm doing. And I would love to keep doing this every year, just ranking my syllabus and getting to talk about them and all the ways that we discussed it in class. But thank you for sitting through. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble about these books. I definitely didn't have all the intellectual thoughts that I wish I did, because it has been a while and I've definitely forgotten a lot of things about these books now. But I want to do another reading update soon of the books I've read since reading these, so that'll be fun. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely day. Hopefully you do not have to have a lemon sip yourself soon and you're enjoying the sun. Cheers.